The evening sky was a deep shade of violet when Clara Morgan steered her sleek black BMW along the narrow mountain road. The last glow of sunset had already faded behind the jagged peaks, leaving only a thin line of silver moonlight to guide her way. Tall pine trees formed dark walls on both sides of the winding path, their branches swaying in the cool autumn wind. The air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves. Clara lowered her window slightly, hoping the crisp mountain breeze might clear her restless mind. For years, Clara had been known in her city as a woman who had everything. She owned a chain of elegant home design stores across the state, a modern house with glass walls overlooking the ocean, and a wardrobe that could fill a small boutique. At 38, she was admired for her confidence and envied for her success. Yet tonight, as the road climbed higher and the night grew colder, Clara felt a quiet ache she couldn't name. Success had brought comfort, but lately it had also brought an emptiness that her expensive car and designer coat could not hide. Her friends often said she was lucky to have wealth, lucky to travel anywhere, lucky to answer to no one. But luck had its own silence. After years of rushing from one meeting to another, hosting glittering parties and keeping up an image of perfect control, Clara sometimes wondered when she had last felt truly at peace. The mountain trip was meant to be a break. She planned to spend a few days at the small vacation cabin she rarely visited, hoping the quiet would help her think. The BMW's headlights cut through the mist, revealing sharp turns and sudden drops where the road clung to the mountainside. Clara tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She was not afraid of driving. She loved the hum of a good engine, but something about the endless forest made her uneasy. Her phone had lost signal half an hour ago, and the radio only produced soft static. The world felt far away. As she drove, memories flickered through her mind. She remembered her parents' modest home, where every item was carefully saved for and cared for. Her father had worked long hours as a school principal, her mother as a nurse. They had taught her to value hard work and kindness. Clara wondered what they would think of her life now. Would they see a woman who had fulfilled her dreams, or someone who had traded simple happiness for endless ambition? The thought was interrupted by a faint sound, an irregular knock from the engine. Clara frowned and glanced at the dashboard. A yellow warning light blinked, then went out. Probably nothing, she murmured, trying to convince herself. Still, her heart beat a little faster. The road grew steeper. A sharp bend forced her to slow. Then, without warning, the car gave a low cough. The steering wheel felt heavy in her hands. Another cough, louder this time. The warning light flashed bright red. No, not here, Clara said under her breath. She guided the BMW to the side of the narrow road, just as the engine sputtered and died. The sudden silence was startling. She tried the ignition again, once, twice. The car remained still, a dark shape under the cold moon. Clara exhaled, pressing her forehead against the steering wheel. She was alone on a mountain road miles from the nearest town with no cell service. A faint mist curled across the asphalt. Somewhere deep in the forest an owl called, its sound long and hollow. She turned on the car's interior light, searching for some reassurance. The familiar leather seats and polished dashboard looked strange under the pale glow. Okay, she said softly to herself. Stay calm. Her voice sounded small. Clara reached for her phone. No signal as expected. She considered walking, but the idea of leaving the safety of the car made her uneasy. She checked the time, 9:17 p.m. The mountain night would only grow darker and colder. Wrapping her coat tighter, she stepped out of the car to inspect the engine. The air outside was biting and the quiet almost unnatural. She opened the hood, though she knew little about engines. A faint smell of oil rose up, but nothing obvious seemed wrong. She wished, not for the first time, that she had learned basic car repairs instead of relying on roadside services. The forest seemed to watch her. Pine needles rustled in the breeze, and somewhere far away, a branch cracked like a dry bone. Clara closed the hood and got back into the BMW, locking the doors. She turned on the small overhead light and pulled a blanket from the back seat, grateful she had packed one for the cabin. Minutes passed slowly. She tried to think of practical solutions. Someone would drive by, she reasoned. Even on a mountain road, there had to be travelers. But as the minutes stretched into nearly an hour, not a single set of headlights appeared. Her thoughts wandered again. She remembered the last dinner party she had hosted, people laughing, glasses clinking, yet everyone half distracted by their phones. She had smiled all evening, but the laughter had felt distant. Now, sitting in the quiet car, Clara wondered if her busy life had been a way to hide the loneliness she feared to admit. She thought of her father's words long ago. The world is wide, Clara, but the people you meet along the way, that's where the real treasure is. She had nodded then, eager to chase her career. Only now, surrounded by endless dark woods, did she begin to understand. A sudden gust of wind shook the branches outside, startling her. Clara's heart skipped. She peered through the windshield. Nothing but mist and shadow. The clock on the dashboard read 10:05. The mountain night was deep and silent. Clara felt a tightness in her chest. She was not someone who scared easily, yet the isolation pressed against her like a heavy blanket. She imagined the road stretching for miles in both directions, empty and cold. She turned off the interior light to save the battery, plunging the car into near darkness. Only the faint moonlight outlined the trees. She listened to her own breathing. Each second seemed louder than the last. Finally, a distant sound broke the stillness, a low rumble, faint but growing. Clara sat up, straining to hear. It was the unmistakable growl of an engine. Relief washed through her like warm sunlight. She pressed her face to the side window, searching the curve of the road. Far away, a pair of dim headlights emerged from the fog, slow and steady. A vehicle, maybe a truck, was approaching. Clara's heart pounded with both hope and caution. She had been raised to be careful with strangers. Yet tonight, any human presence felt like a lifeline. The lights drew nearer, illuminating the misty road. It was an old pickup truck, its paint dull and edges worn. It rolled to a gentle stop behind her BMW. The engine idled, a soft rumble in the quiet night. Clara gripped the steering wheel, watching as the driver's door opened. A tall figure stepped out, wearing a thick jacket and sturdy boots. The man paused, hands visible, and called out in a calm, steady voice, "Evening. Need some help?" Clara hesitated. The night air was cold, but his tone carried a warmth that eased her fear. She lowered the window slightly, meeting his eyes in the moonlight. They were kind, steady eyes lined with years of work and weather. "My car. It just stopped," she said, her voice softer than she expected. The man nodded. "Mind if I take a look?" And in that moment, on a lonely mountain road with the night pressing close, Clara felt the first flicker of hope. She didn't know who this stranger was or why he had appeared, but something in his manner told her she was not alone anymore. The cold night air swirled around Clara as she stepped out of her BMW. Moonlight shimmered on the mist that drifted over the mountain road, giving everything a silver glow. The man who had arrived in the old pickup truck waited a few feet away, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. His posture was calm, and he stood just far enough to show respect for her space. "My name's Daniel," he said in a voice steady and low. "I live a few miles down the mountain. I know a thing or two about engines. Want me to take a look?" Clara studied him for a moment. He looked to be in his early 40s with sun-browned skin and short dark hair streaked lightly with gray. His boots were worn but strong, and his eyes, deep brown, almost copper in the moonlight, carried a quiet honesty. Clara felt a small knot of tension loosen in her chest. "Yes, please," she replied. "The engine just stopped." "I don't know what happened." Daniel nodded once and stepped toward the BMW. "Pop the hood," he said. His movements were sure, like someone who had spent years with machines. Clara pressed the release lever inside the car and joined him at the front. The scent of cool metal and faint oil drifted out as Daniel lifted the hood. He slipped a small headlamp over his forehead, its soft white light spilling across the engine. His hands were strong but careful as he checked cables and connections. "You've got a solid car," he said after a minute, almost to himself. "But even the best ones can surprise you out here." Clara hugged her coat around her. "Do you think it's serious?" He glanced at her briefly, the beam of his light catching a gentle smile. "Could be a simple connection. Might take a little time to be sure. You stay warm." For a while, the only sounds were the quiet clink of tools from a small kit Daniel retrieved from his truck, and the whisper of wind through the pines. Clara watched him work, noticing how focused he remained, how he checked each detail without rush. To ease her own nerves, she asked, "Do you often help strangers on dark roads?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Not every night, but I drive this way to check on my place. I was coming back from town when I saw your car. You live nearby?" "About 4 miles down on a small farm. Used to be my father's. I take care of it now. Clara tilted her head, curious. A farm? That sounds peaceful. It is, he said. Quiet, but not lonely if you like the land. Cows, a few goats, and a big garden. Keeps me busy. His words painted a picture Clara found strangely comforting. A simple life of open fields and early mornings. She realized how different it was from her own world of glass offices and crowded streets. Daniel tightened a screw and wiped his hands with a rag. I worked as a mechanic for 20 years before I came back to the farm, he continued. My dad wasn't well toward the end. After he passed, I stayed on. It felt right. Clara listened, her breath forming little clouds in the cold. She thought of her own parents, long gone now, and how she had thrown herself into business after their passing. Work had been her way of coping, her shield against emptiness. I admire that, she said quietly. Taking care of family. Not everyone would make that choice, Daniel gave a small shrug. Sometimes we don't choose. We just know what we have to do. His words settled over her like the soft mountain fog. She found herself speaking without planning it. I spend so much time working that I sometimes forget what matters. I thought this trip would help me slow down. Daniel looked up, meeting her eyes with steady kindness. Sometimes the road itself reminds us, he said. Tonight it brought you here. Clara felt a strange warmth despite the chill. This man she had just met spoke as if he understood something she had been feeling for years. The wind picked up, carrying the clean scent of pine and damp earth. Daniel leaned closer to the engine, checking another connection. His voice was gentle when he spoke again. Your battery cable was loose. Might be the reason it cut out. I'll tighten it and test the start. Clara exhaled in relief. That doesn't sound too bad. Not at all, he said. Lucky you didn't try to drive farther. The road ahead gets steeper. As he worked, Clara studied the pickup truck parked behind them. Its faded blue paint and dented fender suggested years of travel, perhaps many nights like this. She wondered how many people Daniel had quietly helped without asking for anything in return. When he finished, Daniel closed the hood and wiped his hands again. Try starting it now, he said. Clara slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The BMW's engine hummed to life, smooth and strong. Relief flooded her chest. She stepped out, a grateful smile lighting her face. You fixed it, she said. Simple fix, Daniel replied. But you'll want a proper check when you reach town. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp bill. Please let me pay you for your time. It's the least I can do. Daniel shook his head immediately. No need. I'm just glad I was here when you needed help. But you came all this way and it's late, Clara insisted. He gave a quiet laugh. I was already on the road, and I believe in helping when we can. My dad always said kindness travels farther than any car. The words caught her off guard. That's beautiful, she said softly. They stood there for a moment, neither speaking. The forest around them seemed to breathe, the moonlight bright on the mist. Clara felt something shift inside her, a sense of connection she hadn't expected. Finally, Daniel glanced toward his truck. You're all set now. Where were you headed? I have a small cabin a few miles farther, Clara said. I was planning to spend a few quiet days there. Good spot for quiet, Daniel said with a nod. The road curves sharply after the next ridge. Drive slow. Black ice sometimes forms this time of night. Thank you, she said, for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along. You'd have figured something out, he said kindly, but I'm glad I could help. Clara hesitated, then asked, would you mind if I stop by your farm sometime? I'd like to thank you properly. Daniel smiled, a gentle light in his eyes. You'd be welcome anytime. It's nothing fancy, but the coffee's strong and the view is worth the drive. For a moment, Clara imagined it, a morning on that quiet farm. The smell of fresh earth and strong coffee, the sound of birds instead of city traffic. The thought brought an unexpected sense of peace. I'd like that, she said simply. Daniel tipped his head, a small gesture of agreement. Drive safe, Clara. He had remembered her name even though she hadn't given it tonight. She realized she must have mentioned it without noticing when they first spoke. As he returned to his truck, Clara watched him with a feeling she couldn't quite name. Not romance exactly, but a recognition of kindness, of something real and grounded. In a world where so many people rushed past one another, this quiet stranger had stopped to help without expecting anything in return. She climbed back into her BMW and waited until his truck disappeared around the curve, its taillights fading into the mist. The engine purred steadily now, but Clara lingered, hands resting on the wheel. The mountain no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt alive with possibility. When she finally began to drive, the road ahead seemed different, less like a barrier and more like a path leading somewhere she had yet to discover. Her thoughts drifted to the simple farm Daniel had described. She found herself smiling at the idea of visiting, of hearing more of his quiet wisdom. As the car climbed the next ridge, Clara realized that her unexpected breakdown had already begun to fix something deeper than a loose cable. In the stillness of the mountain night, she felt a small but certain change in her own heart. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the mountains like soft gold, melting the last of the night's mist. Clara woke in her small cabin to the sound of birdsong. The air inside smelled faintly of pine from the logs stacked near the fireplace. She had slept more deeply than she had in months, though she wasn't sure if it was the fresh mountain air or the memory of the kind stranger who had helped her the night before. Daniel. His name stayed with her like a gentle echo. She remembered his steady voice, the calm way he spoke, and how he refused to take money for helping. In her world, favors usually came with a price. His quiet generosity felt like something rare. After making a cup of coffee, Clara stepped onto the wooden porch. The view stretched far, rolling green hills dotted with yellow autumn leaves, a blue sky that seemed endless. She breathed deeply. The city, with its noise and endless meetings, felt like another lifetime. Clara's plan had been to spend a few days here reading and resting, but her thoughts kept wandering down the road toward Daniel's farm. She hesitated. It wasn't like her to visit someone she'd met only once, but something about him, and the way he spoke about his father and the land, made her curious. By mid-morning, she decided. She would drive the short distance and thank him again, maybe bring something as a small gesture. From the cabin's pantry, she packed a jar of local honey she'd bought on her last trip. Simple but heartfelt. The drive down the mountain was peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting shifting patterns on the road. Clara found herself smiling at the memory of her BMW breaking down. Only yesterday she would have called it a disaster. Now it felt like the start of something unexpected. Soon she spotted a wooden sign that read, Morgan Creek Farm, hand-painted with faded white letters. A gravel path curved gently between rows of tall maples whose leaves burned with red and orange. Clara slowed, tires crunching softly as she followed the lane. The farmhouse came into view, a sturdy white building with a wide porch and a green metal roof. Beyond it stretched fields where a few brown and white cows grazed lazily. A red barn stood to one side, its doors open to reveal stacks of hay. The scene looked like a painting, simple, warm, and alive. Daniel was outside repairing a wooden fence post. He straightened as she parked, brushing sawdust from his hands. His surprised smile was as calm as the morning itself. Clara, he said, as if her arrival were the most natural thing in the world. I didn't expect company today. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, stepping out of the car with the jar of honey in hand. I wanted to thank you properly for last night. No need, Daniel replied, though his eyes softened when he saw the gift. But I'm glad you came. He waved her toward the porch. Would you like some coffee? I just brewed a fresh pot. Clara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. I'd like that. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of warm wood and fresh coffee. The living room was cozy, filled with handmade furniture and shelves lined with old books. A quilt, clearly stitched with care, rested across a rocking chair. Daniel poured coffee into 2 sturdy mugs and handed one to her. I get the beans from a small roaster in town, he said. Best I've found. Clara took a sip and smiled at the rich flavor. It's wonderful, she said. Better than anything I buy in the city. They sat at a wooden table near a wide window. Sunlight streamed across the worn surface, highlighting faint knife marks from years of meals shared there. Clara felt an unexpected sense of comfort, as if the house itself welcomed her. For a while they talked about simple things, the changing seasons, the animals on the farm, the best hiking trails nearby. Daniel's voice carried an easy rhythm. Clara noticed how he listened fully when she spoke, never rushing to fill the silence. Eventually, conversation drifted to their pasts. Daniel spoke of growing up on the farm with his father, of learning to repair engines in a small-town garage, and of the years he had worked long days before returning home to care for his father in his final illness. "I thought I'd leave this place behind forever," Daniel admitted. "But after he passed, it felt right to stay. The farm, it keeps me grounded." Clara listened, her heart tightening at the quiet strength in his words. She told him about her parents, too, how her mother had been a nurse who loved late-night walks, how her father had believed in kindness above all things. "They worked so hard," she said, her voice softening. "I wanted to make them proud. Maybe I got lost in trying to prove something." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think we all lose our way at times. The question is whether we find the road back." His words settled between them like a warm blanket. Clara realized how long it had been since she'd shared her thoughts so openly with anyone. In the city, conversations often felt like competitions, people waiting to talk instead of listening. Here time seemed to stretch gently, giving room for honesty. After a quiet moment, Daniel stood. "Come on," he said with a small smile. "Let me show you the farm." They walked outside into the late morning sun. Daniel led her past the grazing cows and the neat vegetable garden, where green shoots still pushed through the soil despite the season. He explained how he rotated crops to keep the earth healthy, and how he collected rainwater in barrels to nourish the plants. Clara listened with genuine interest. She was used to polished presentations and glossy brochures. Here everything was real, every fence post, every plant the result of careful hands and patient work. At the barn, a pair of goats bleated a cheerful greeting. Daniel laughed and offered Clara a handful of hay. "They're friendly," he said. Clara held out the hay, smiling when the goats nibbled from her palm. "They're adorable," she said. "I can't remember the last time I did something like this." "City life doesn't usually include goats," Daniel teased lightly. They continued walking, the sound of their footsteps mixing with the soft rustle of leaves. Clara felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. When they reached a small hill at the edge of the property, Daniel pointed toward the horizon. "On clear days you can see the river down there," he said. "At sunset the sky turns every shade of gold." Clara followed his gaze. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills fading into the distance, a silver ribbon of water catching the sun. For a moment neither of them spoke. "This is beautiful," Clara whispered. "It reminds me to slow down," Daniel said quietly. "The land teaches patience." Clara thought about her own life, how she measured success in deadlines and profits, how she rarely paused long enough to watch a sunset. Standing there beside Daniel, she felt something shift. As noon approached, they returned to the farmhouse. Daniel offered her a simple lunch of fresh bread, cheese, and apples from his orchard. They ate on the porch, the breeze carrying the scent of pine. Conversation flowed easily, from favorite books to childhood memories. At one point, Clara admitted, "I can't remember the last time I sat down for a meal without checking my phone every few minutes." Daniel smiled. "No signal here," he said. "The mountains keep us honest." Clara laughed softly, realizing she hadn't thought about her phone all day. When it was finally time to leave, she felt an unexpected tug of reluctance. She stood beside her car, the afternoon sun warm on her shoulders. "Thank you for showing me your world," she said. "It's different from mine, but I think it's what I needed." "You're welcome here any time," Daniel replied. "The farm doesn't mind company." Clara smiled, a gentle warmth spreading through her chest. "I might take you up on that." As she drove back toward her cabin, the road felt less like a lonely stretch of mountain and more like a bridge between two lives, the one she had built and the one she had just discovered. She didn't know what the coming days would bring, but she felt certain of one thing: something inside her was beginning to change, and it started with a stranger who had simply stopped to help on a dark road. The next day dawned cool and clear, with a sky so blue it almost seemed new. Clara woke early, her mind full of the farm and of Daniel's calm voice. She brewed a small pot of coffee in the cabin's kitchen, the rich smell filling the room, and stepped outside to the porch. Below her, the forest shimmered with morning light. She had planned to spend this day hiking alone, but the memory of Daniel's quiet wisdom called to her like a soft bell. After a quick breakfast, she packed a basket with fresh fruit and bread she had bought earlier in town, thinking it might be a kind gesture to share. Something about visiting the farm again felt natural, as if the mountain itself was guiding her back. The drive down was peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the trees, throwing playful shadows on the road. Clara hummed a tune she barely remembered from childhood. For years, she had measured mornings by meetings and phone calls. Today, the only schedule she kept was the rhythm of the road. When she arrived at the farm, Daniel was in the garden, bending to pick the last of the season's tomatoes. He looked up at the sound of her car, his face breaking into an easy smile. "You came back," he said, brushing soil from his hands. "I hope I'm not disturbing your work," Clara replied, holding up the basket. "I thought you might like some company, and maybe a small picnic?" Daniel's eyes warmed. "That sounds perfect. I was about to take a break anyway." They spread a blanket on the gentle slope of a hill behind the house, where the view stretched across rolling fields and distant trees. The sun shone gently and a mild breeze carried the scent of earth and pine. Clara unpacked the fruit and bread, and Daniel added a jar of his own homemade jam. "This is my favorite spot," he said as they settled down. "My father used to sit here every evening. Said it reminded him of how wide the world can be." Clara glanced at him. "It's beautiful. I can see why he loved it." For a while they ate in companionable silence, the simple meal more satisfying than any restaurant feast Clara had ever had. She found herself savoring every bite, noticing details she would usually overlook: the sweetness of the fruit, the soft rustle of leaves, the warmth of the sun on her skin. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "You seem lighter today." "The mountains are working their magic," Clara smiled. "Maybe they are, or maybe it's the company." Daniel chuckled softly. "The company helps," he admitted. They began to talk about their lives again, this time with deeper honesty. Clara shared memories of long workdays that stretched past midnight, of boardrooms full of people who measured worth by numbers and profit. She confessed how, despite her success, she sometimes felt like a visitor in her own life. "I built everything I thought I wanted," she said, her voice low, "but sometimes I wonder if I've been chasing the wrong things." Daniel listened without interrupting, his gaze steady on the horizon. When she finished, he said, "It takes courage to see that. Most people don't stop long enough to ask themselves what really matters." Clara looked at him, surprised by the quiet strength in his words. "Did you ever feel like that? Like you needed to start over?" Daniel nodded slowly. "When I came back to the farm, I worried I was giving up. My friends were building careers in the city, and I thought maybe I was falling behind. But then I realized I was exactly where I needed to be. This land, this life, it gives more than it takes." His words settled deep in Clara's heart. She thought of her father's advice, the one she had almost forgotten. The real treasure is in the people you meet along the way. The afternoon drifted gently. They walked through the orchard, where apples hung like small lanterns in the sunlight. Daniel showed her how to tell which ones were ready to pick, and Clara laughed when her first attempt left her with a handful of leaves instead of fruit. "You're a natural," Daniel teased, handing her a bright red apple. "Hardly," she said, smiling, "but it's fun to try." Later, they returned to the porch where Daniel poured cool water from an old glass pitcher. The sun began to sink behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Clara felt time slow, as if the evening itself wanted to linger. "This is my favorite hour," Daniel said softly. "Everything feels alive but calm, like the day is saying goodbye without regret." Clara watched the changing sky, her heart swelling with a feeling she couldn't quite name. "I've missed this," she admitted. "Not this place, I didn't know it until now, but this feeling. Being present. Watching the world instead of racing past it," Daniel nodded. "The world has its own rhythm. Sometimes we just need to listen." A comfortable silence followed. The breeze cooled as the first stars appeared. Clara found herself telling Daniel about her parents again, their kindness, their quiet strength. She spoke of the little garden her mother had kept behind their house, how her father had read stories by the window on rainy days. Memories she hadn't touched in years felt alive again in the soft evening air. Daniel shared stories of his father, too. The early mornings in the fields, the quiet wisdom of a man who believed in hard work and simple joys. He used to say, Daniel recalled with a smile, "Take care of the land, and it will take care of you." I think he meant more than just the soil, Clara nodded, feeling the truth in those words. As darkness settled, Daniel lit a small lantern on the porch. Its warm glow spilled across the wooden boards, casting gentle shadows. Clara wrapped her sweater tighter, not against the chill, but against a sudden, sweet ache, a wish that this evening could last. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Daniel asked, his tone casual but kind. "It's nothing fancy, just vegetable soup and fresh bread." Clara hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled. "I'd love to." Inside, the farmhouse kitchen smelled of herbs and fresh vegetables. Daniel moved with easy skill, chopping carrots and onions while Clara sliced bread. They worked side by side, the quiet rhythm of shared tasks filling the space. As the soup simmered, Clara felt an unexpected contentment. She thought of all the elegant dinners she had attended in glittering city restaurants. None of them compared to this simple meal, prepared with care in a warm kitchen on a quiet mountain night. When they finally sat down to eat, Clara tasted the soup and laughed softly. "This is amazing," she said. Daniel smiled. "It's just what the garden gave us." They talked late into the evening, their conversation flowing as easily as the gentle wind outside. They spoke of hopes, of lessons learned, of small joys often overlooked. Clara felt as if she had known Daniel far longer than 2 days. By the time she stepped outside to leave, the night was alive with stars. The air was cool and fragrant with pine. Daniel walked her to her car, the lantern casting a soft halo around them. "Thank you," Clara said, her voice sincere, "for everything." For today. Daniel met her eyes, his expression warm but steady. "Thank you for coming. It's good to share the quiet with someone who listens." For a moment, they simply stood together under the endless sky. Then Clara started the BMW, its gentle hum blending with the night sounds. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Daniel standing by the lantern's glow, a calm figure against the dark hills. The road back to her cabin was the same winding path as before, but it felt different now. No longer a place of worry, it seemed to lead her forward, towards something she could not yet name but felt deeply. The mountain had changed her. Or perhaps it had simply helped her find the change she'd been waiting for all along. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall pines outside Clara's cabin, casting golden stripes across the wooden floor. She opened her eyes slowly, her heart carrying a gentle warmth that had stayed with her through the night. The quiet of the mountain seemed to hum with a soft promise, as if the forest itself remembered the conversations she had shared with Daniel the evening before. Clara brewed a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and pine needles. Far away, a hawk circled above the valley, moving with calm certainty. She sipped her drink and let the stillness settle inside her. Today was supposed to be the day she returned to her normal life. Emails waited, meetings waited, an entire city waited. Yet for the first time in years, none of that felt urgent. Her heart tugged toward the farm, toward the kind stranger who had turned a night of trouble into a journey of meaning. After a quiet breakfast, Clara packed her bag. She folded her clothes neatly, but her movements slowed each time she thought of leaving. She glanced at the BMW parked outside, now perfectly repaired and ready for the road. Days ago, that car had symbolized independence and success. This morning, it felt almost like a gentle goodbye. Before driving off the mountain, Clara made a choice that surprised even her. She steered the car not toward the highway, but toward Daniel's farm. The familiar path through the forest now felt like a road between two lives. When she arrived, the sun was higher, warming the wooden boards of the farmhouse porch. Daniel was carrying a basket of freshly harvested apples when he noticed her car. His face brightened with a smile that reached his eyes. "I was hoping I might see you again," he said, setting the basket down. Clara returned the smile, her heart lifting. "I wanted to stop by before I head back to the city, to say thank you properly." "You don't have to thank me," Daniel replied, "but I'm glad you came." They stood for a moment in the quiet morning, neither rushing to fill the silence. The sound of birdsong and a soft breeze through the orchard surrounded them. "I brought something for you," Clara said at last, handing him a small envelope. Inside was a simple card she had written before leaving the cabin. "Thank you for reminding me what matters," the note said. Daniel read the words and looked up, his expression gentle. "This means a lot," he said. "More than you know," Clara hesitated. "You helped me more than you realize. That night when my car broke down, I thought it was just bad luck. But now it feels like it happened for a reason, like I was meant to meet you and this place." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the road gives us what we need even when we don't expect it." They walked together through the orchard, the apples shining red and gold in the morning light. Daniel handed Clara one of the ripest fruits. "Take this for the drive," he said. "It's sweet, just like the season's end." Clara bit into the apple, the crisp flavor filling her senses. She thought of all the polished meals she had eaten in expensive restaurants, none of them carrying the simple joy of this single piece of fruit. As they strolled, Clara found herself speaking of her plans with unexpected openness. "I don't know what I'll do when I get back," she admitted. "Part of me wants to jump straight into work. Another part of me wants to slow down, maybe even take a break." Daniel listened, his calm presence a steadying force. "You'll know what to do," he said. "You've already started listening to yourself. That's the hardest part." Clara paused by a wooden fence, gazing out at the rolling hills. "I used to think slowing down meant falling behind, but now it feels like the only way forward." Daniel smiled faintly. "The world will always keep moving, but your life belongs to you." They lingered under the wide sky, neither speaking for a long while. Clara felt an ache deep in her chest, not of sadness, but of something tender and new. Finally, she turned to him. "Would you ever visit the city?" Daniel's eyes held a quiet humor. "Maybe someday. But my heart is here, this land. It's my home," Clara nodded. "I understand. And I think I need to find what feels like home for me, too." The words felt true the moment she spoke them. As the day warmed, Clara knew she couldn't delay her departure forever. They returned to the farmhouse porch where her car waited in the driveway. Daniel walked beside her, his steady steps matching her own. At the car, Clara turned to him once more. "Daniel," she said softly, "I'll never forget this place or you. You've given me something I didn't know I was missing." He looked at her with the same calm strength he had shown from the start. "And you've brought light to this mountain in your own way," he replied. "Wherever you go, carry that with you." They stood there for a heartbeat, the breeze playing with the edge of Clara's scarf. Words felt too small for the moment, so they simply shared a quiet understanding. Finally, Clara opened the car door. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too," Daniel answered. "The road is wide. Maybe it will bring you back someday." Clara smiled, her eyes bright. "Maybe it will." She started the engine, the soft hum breaking the stillness. As she drove down the gravel path, she looked back once. Daniel remained on the porch, a steady figure framed by the orchard and the endless sky. The mountain road unfurled before her, the same twisting path that had once felt dark and dangerous. Now it seemed alive, guiding her forward rather than holding her back. The sunlight flickered through the trees, and for the first time in years, Clara felt no need to rush. As the miles passed, memories of the past few days filled her mind. The lantern's glow, the quiet dinners, the simple wisdom in Daniel's words. She thought of her father's voice from long ago. The real treasure is in the people you meet along the way. Now she understood. When Clara finally reached the city, the noise and movement greeted her like a familiar song. Yet something inside her had shifted. The tall buildings no longer seemed to measure success. Her own heartbeat felt like the true measure of time. Instead of driving straight to her office, Clara parked near a small public park she had often ignored. She sat on a bench beneath a maple tree, watching families play and strangers share quiet moments. The city still moved fast, but she no longer felt caught in its current. That evening, she opened her laptop and drafted an email to her team. She announced a short leave from work, not to escape, but to breathe. She wanted to visit her parents' hometown, to rebuild the little garden behind her own house, to rediscover pieces of herself that had been waiting. As she pressed send, a gentle peace settled over her. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to live differently. She visited farmers' markets, cooked her own meals, and took long walks at sunset. She started painting again, a hobby she had once loved. The rush of the old life faded, replaced by a deeper rhythm. Often she thought of Daniel and the mountain road. Sometimes she wrote him letters, though she never knew if she would send them. Each word felt like a quiet promise to stay true to what she had learned. Months later, when autumn leaves blazed in gold and red, Clara returned to the mountains. She parked near the old trail and walked along the familiar path. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the same scent of pine and earth. At the crest of the hill, she paused and looked out over the valley. She didn't know if Daniel was home or out in the fields, but it didn't matter. The mountain itself welcomed her back, steady and strong. Clara closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The road that had once begun with a broken car had become something endless inside her, a reminder that life's true wealth was not in possessions or titles, but in moments of connection and quiet understanding. With the wind against her face and the sky stretching wide above, Clara smiled. The journey would never truly end. It had only just begun.